All right, these are the Edelbrock Magnum heads for OG SRT is my all-wheel drive 2001 Durango, 5.9 Durango. So I made a short earlier on these heads and a little bit of what I was doing, but I want to explain more about what I'm doing. We'll take a quick look at the heads. The intakes are untouched. And as I showed you before, their quality control is garbage. You can see all that chunks of aluminum that are going to come off and go in my fresh engine. That's where they drilled and tapped for the rocker studs, the guide plates and stuff, and just did a poor job on it. Not knocking Edelbrock. I like Edelbrock, and for the money, they're fine. But don't pull these out of the box and bolt them on. Understand that you have to tear them back down, reseal them, check torque on everything. You know, one of the rocker studs was finger tight. Another one wasn't even seated all the way down. The rest of them are tight as hell. So just strip them down, have them checked out at a local shop or check them out yourself. Take care of some of these issues and then run them. So untouched intakes, untouched chambers, I'm not there yet. Now you can see this is a finished port with a sand roll. I did the exhaust, I haven't done the intakes yet. These are roughed out ports with a carbide bit that I have not gotten into the sand roll yet. And I really shortened the floor on the short turn radius. Normally, just don't mess with the short turn, but on these particular heads, it's an issue. The floor is very tall, very tall. If I get my other heads, my untouched heads, I'll try to get some measurements and show you guys the difference between the ports and untouched one, and then what I've ended up with here. So there's my exhaust. Here's again my roughed out exhaust that haven't been hit with a sand roll yet. So then what I did this morning on your intake, when I go to pour my intake, you've got a hump here where your push rods go. It's your push rod tube. So I want to port, but at some point as you're opening this up, you're going to break through the wall, or you're just not going to open it up that much. A lot of guys just don't open it up that much, but I think that's going to be an issue for me. So, and you can see where this is what Edelbrock does. They call that gasket matching. They run their CNC, maybe they catch some of it, maybe, you know, it just ends up looking like shit. So don't just pull them out of the box and run them. Blend this over, open this up, do what you got to do. So I sleeve these. You can see where I epoxied in a brass sleeve there. Okay, and then what that's going to do is as I port through my intake wall, right, as I come through here with my carbide, if I just start to see the epoxy show or just go through and get a little bit of the brass, then I know that's where I need to stop. If I didn't sleeve them, if I broke through, then you'd have a vacuum leak here, you know, down into your engine. So that's why I epoxy it and I sleeve it. That's going to prevent any vacuum leaks, and it's going to let me know the maximum that I can open up this area and where I need to stop. When you get into, let's say, a W2 head or TA heads or other stuff, you can see the Mopar did the same thing. What they did was they have an offset rocker arm. They moved this pushrod tunnel out of the port, and that's why they run an offset rocker only on the intakes. So if you look up some of the W2 heads or TA heads or something like that, you'll see that the factory knew that was a problem and they tried to correct it on more of their race stuff. So the reason I'm talking about this, one, if you have not checked out Wallace Racing, check out Wallace Racing. They've got, I don't know, probably hundreds of calculators, gear ratio, mile an hour. They've got a lot of very useful calculators for somebody building an engine. one of the calculators they have is cross section. And what you can do is, I take a tool like this and I check my height, and then I'll run it on a set of calipers. Okay, and if you put your height and your width into the Wallace Racing calculator, they'll give you the square inches on your cross section of this port. Not what Edelbrock tells you the port is from here to here, but what your actual airflow port is. They'll give you the cross section, and then they have some different calculators that would help you if you have an oval port big block Chevy head versus a rec port head, and the area that you lose in the oval port. They can still calculate that. So I'm going to say it for the millionth time, Wallace Racing, check them out. Tons and tons you can spend all day there looking at different calculators and figuring out what you want. The point of all this, and the point of why I want to open up this pinch, and the point of why I'm sleeving it and why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because when I calculate this port, it gives me 1.73 square inches. That's my cross section area. On a 408, this is going on a 408 stroker, 5.9 Magnum. On a 408, this cross section does not become a restriction until 4,800 RPM. So if I'm spinning 5,000 or 6,000 RPM, 6,500 RPM, this pinch point here becomes a restriction. On a 408, if I want to spin 6,500 RPM, I need a cross section to not be a restriction of 2.43 square inches. So I've got to get from my 1.73 square inches of width here, and I measured that out at 0.865 wide. I need to open that up and get as close as I can. I'm not saying I'm able to achieve this, but I've ported some iron heads and I've actually gotten really close. I think I've gotten in the 220s, 2.2 for a cross section. So this is my goal here, is to get to a 2.43 cross section and allow my 408 to breathe unrestricted to 6,500. That's my goal. So that's why you sleeve these. That's why I'm opening it up and not leaving it where it is, or not gasket matching it and just being happy with that. I'm going to take my tightest point here in the pinch, and I'm going to try to widen that, let's say to a 940. I may get into a 0.940 range, and then see what that gives me for a cross section, and see what kind of RPMs that lets my 408 wind out to before the port becomes a restriction. Check them out, wallaceracing.com. You're going to spend all day there once you figure out their calculators and gear ratio and mile an hour and everything they have there. So that's where I'm at, Project OG SRT.